The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
So now we've gotten a look at both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's so-called economic plans. And in some cases, I'm using those terms pretty loosely. And it turns out that in many cases, there's not much of a difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump's ideas. We'll go through it. For example, Hillary Clinton is planning on spending $300 billion over 5 years on infrastructure. Both Trump and Clinton have said they want to ramp up infrastructure spending. Now, it could be to different degrees, but we are very quickly, Lewis, talking about shades of gray on this particular issue. And to get us into this conversation, there are those who say, well, the fact that Hillary and Donald are similar on some of their economic issues is proof that either Trump is not really conservative or Hillary is not really liberal. There's another way of looking at that, though, which is actually, it's more proof that the parameters for economic policy are so narrow within mainstream American politics that you're really only going to see differences in terms of shades of gray. Do we want a $10, $12, or $15 minimum wage? Do we want $300 billion or $400 billion on infrastructure spending, et cetera? I think it's more indicative of that than of anything else.
That is true. It's also indicative of just what a disastrous state our infrastructure is in, that
Sure.
both are acknowledging that. And that was one of Trump's first platforms and one we agreed with.
Right.
And that's when we thought that Trump might be a somewhat level-headed guy when he started talking about infrastructure spending.
Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are talking about manufacturing. Hillary Clinton has released a $10 billion Make It in America plan. 24 different programs make that up. Some possible boondoggles, no doubt about it. But again, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump both championing manufacturing. Of course, they're ignoring two really important realities, which we've talked about. Number one, many of the manufacturing jobs they claim they will either create or bring back from other countries no longer exist. And number two, one of the most important factors in manufacturing jobs is that automation and artificial intelligence and robotics are going to continue to eliminate many of those jobs. As we've talked about, no political advantage for either of them in mentioning that.
Well, and they are both people who over the course of their lives have seemed to be not in favor of bringing jobs back to the U.S. I mean, at what point in Hillary Clinton's career was she some champion of bringing jobs back to the U.S. and Donald Trump, a guy whose businesses have exported jobs?
Right.
Yeah.
There's a devastating political ad, an anti-Trump ad I've seen going around where he's on the Letterman show and Letterman is grilling him and saying, oh, beautiful ties, where are those made? Oh, Bangladesh. Oh, what a great scarf or whatever. Where's this made? Oh, China. Wow, really great for Chinese jobs, right? And Trump looks visibly uncomfortable. I don't know if you've seen that commercial. Very, very good. And that gets us to trade policy, right? The idea from the Clinton economic plan is trade policy that puts U.S. job creation first, get tough on China, which Trump has talked about. China, China, China. You probably saw that commercial that's been going around. Hillary Clinton now saying she's against the Trans-Pacific Partnership. That's good. She was in favor of it for a while. But Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, even though Trump, you go to these Trump rallies and the Trump supporters say, oh, I like what Trump will do on trade. Well, what exactly will he do? Oh, well, he'll, get us out of bad deals or he'll make good deals or whatever. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump actually a pretty similar message on trade deals, which is they are big picture, not opposed to trade deals. They just don't feel that the current trade deals are the good ones. So once again, we're really talking about shades of gray in many cases with Clinton and Trump on economics.
But you could say, like you were kind of suggesting before, that between Democrats and Republicans, it's all mainstream, it's all shades of gray, and the conversation is always kind of like that.
I want to talk about former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. Some people say Rudolph, and I say Rudolph because there is an L at the end there.
I put the L in.
It's not a very harsh L, but it's an L nonetheless.
Yeah.
Former NYC Mayor Giuliani, a Trump supporter, said yesterday that there weren't terror attacks on U.S. soil prior to to Barack Obama being president. Now, this is the guy, this is Mr. Noun Verb 9/11, as I forget who it was. I think Joe Biden described him. He is known for talking about 9/11 in basically every conversation. He was in Youngstown, Ohio yesterday, where the David Pakman Show airs on TV, by the way, a longtime affiliate in Youngstown, Ohio, at a Trump rally. Here's what he had to say.
Under those 8 years, before Obama came along, we didn't have any successful radical Islamic terrorist attack in the United States. They all started when Clinton and Obama got into office.
This is the guy who ran an entire presidential campaign in 2008 on the premise that he was mayor of New York City on 9/11. He's used 9/11 time and time again for his own political gain. But now all of a sudden, Obama apparently personally invented Islamic terrorism in the United States.
This is a very common theme among the right, and that is that George Bush was fantastic because after 9/11, there were no more attacks. And in every single case, when you talk to these people, 9/11 doesn't count. It's as if it didn't happen.
How can he even say this with a straight face? Because every 2016 voter was alive on 9/11. Now, yes, some were 3 years old at the time, admittedly, but does Giuliani think maybe people won't remember that? Or is it going back to this implicit, other than and after 9/11, we were just completely safe from radical Islamic terror under George W. Bush, which of course also ignores that some very close allies of the United States were devastated by radical Islamic terror. But all of a sudden, what happens outside of our borders doesn't seem to matter, even if it's to our friends, when it's to score political points.
And to say that the foreign policy decisions of George Bush and Dick Cheney had nothing to do with subsequent terrorist attacks is false. That definitely had something to do with it. I'm not putting all the blame on those decisions, though.
When your dad is trying to distance himself from an apparently cozy and suspicious relationship with Russia, it's probably not a good idea to hang out with someone who is rumored to be Vladimir Putin's girlfriend. When your dad's campaign manager, Paul Manafort's name appears on a handwritten ledger as being entitled to somewhere between $12 and $13 million in possibly illegal payments from pro-Russian groups, you may not want to be spotted arm in arm with Vladimir Putin's supposed girlfriend, but that's exactly what Donald Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump, whose body Donald Trump is absolutely stunned by, as we've covered before. She just has the best body, and if it wasn't his own daughter, Trump would love to date her. Ivanka Trump was in a picture, which I will show you here, with Wendy Deng Murdoch in Croatia, seemingly having a grand old time. And you'll notice that last name, Murdoch, Wendy Deng Murdoch, that is not a coincidence. That is because she is the ex-wife of Fox News overlord-in-chief Rupert Murdoch. For years, rumors have swirled that Murdoch's ex-wife and Trump's buddy, Vladimir Putin, maybe buddy is a bit much, possible future buddy, Vladimir Putin, were dating. And the Kremlin has not denied that relationship. Deng did flat out deny the accusations at one point, but now anonymous sources within the Kremlin are saying, oh, no, this is a serious relationship. It seems to me it would have been wise for Ivanka Trump to avoid even the appearance of a possible relationship here, because she's very involved in her dad's campaign. Increasingly, we see any number of compelling connections between Donald Trump's campaign and Paul Manafort and Russia and Vladimir Putin and Viktor Yanukovych, et cetera, et cetera. And now it turns out that they're vacationing together. It certainly doesn't look good.
Yeah, bad optics. I'll say this could just be the whole worldwide billionaires club type thing. They're all friends. They're all buddies. They all know each other. But certainly bad optics. And this, you should know better. If you're the daughter of the Republican nominee, you should know better.
And Jason, you've worked on movies that have scripts. If the 2016 narrative was written into a Hollywood script, I can only assume producers would say, this is so far-fetched and unbelievable that it's not worth producing this film because it's just so clearly over the top. And it's actually what could end up in history books. I mean, no Hollywood producer would believe this because it's so insane.
I mean, it could be a really good sci-fi flick. It could be, Trump gets elected and now it's the, United States of Russia and America. coming to you.
We need a flowchart, actually, to show the connections between Trump, Rupert Murdoch, Paul Manafort, Vladimir Putin, Viktor Yanukovych, Wendy Deng Murdoch, Ivanka Trump, and probably Roger Ailes is somewhere in this flowchart, don't you think?
We might as well include Gretchen Carlson and Megyn Kelly while we're at it. Yeah.
Oh, Megyn Kelly, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, her and Trump. And by the way, Hillary Clinton should probably be on there. She was at Donald Trump's wedding. Trump has donated to Hillary Clinton. This election would probably require the most convoluted and extensive flowchart to figure out, as Trump likes to say, what the hell is going on.
Yeah, it's we could call it an incestuous election, couldn't we?
Oh, to call it that would be a huge understatement.
Yeah, that's what it is.
So there it is, Ivanka clearly having a grand old time with Vladimir Putin's reportedly serious girlfriend, and Paul Manafort, 13 million bucks from pro-Russian groups. No connection whatsoever, of course, between the Trump campaign and Vladimir Putin. Am I missing some element of this? Is my flowchart missing a few names? Let me know on Twitter. I'm on Twitter at dpacman, and of course our Reddit discussion forum at davidpacman.com/Reddit.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Francine Bunton. Francine Bunton is a really great person, and she's actually been a member for a little bit. She signed up at davidpakman.com/membership. You can also sign up there. We will also be taking your calls tomorrow, Wednesday, August 17th. At 1:15 p.m. Eastern Time. The number is 617-830-4750. And bookmark it, make a little calendar reminder, etc. It's going to be a grand old time. All right, Lewis, we have a couple of very, very compelling pictures from my Instagram feed over the last week. Of course, I'm on Instagram at david.pacman. Things are getting pretty crazy on my Instagram feed. I know you've attested to this.
Have I? Yes,
sure.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Breakfast pictures seem to do really well. And the other day, I don't often do this, but I took a picture of my breakfast, which I will show you here. And it's not that often that I just have a good old fashioned breakfast.
Did you make that?
No. This was at a place called the Paramount in Boston, which I highly, highly recommend. Are you still into breakfast these days? Like, pancakes or home fries and eggs, like the traditional American breakfast?
I don't like getting up and going out for breakfast.
Yeah.
But I love the food, the breakfast food. I love it. There's some great brunch places right across the street from me.
Sure.
And it's great. I love pancakes and French toast and all that stuff that's terrible for you.
You into that world, Jason, as far as like, the stereotypical big American breakfast?
I'd say my favorite breakfast ever is a breakfast frittata, like, quiche without the crust. That's
right.
my go-to. But I don't know. I'm not so much a pancakes and waffles guy. I'm more of a eggs and potatoes kind of guy.
Blood sausage, anybody?
No.
Nah. Yeah.
No.
I don't eat pork anymore, but when I was a little kid, I used to love blood sausage till I figured out what it was. And then I loved it a little bit less. And then,
Phased it out.
Now I just phased it out, yeah. Also, this is the most popular picture on my Instagram feed over the last week. If you're looking at this, and if you're not, you can pull up my account on Instagram at david.pacman. I went to a place in Salem, Massachusetts, infamous for the Salem witch trials, of course. There's a place called Bit Bar, which has a whole bunch of console arcade games. And I played what was growing up one of my favorite arcade games. Not console arcade games. The big, what am I talking about here?
Arcade games.
Arcade games, yeah. Not a console, right. And played NBA Jam. And I loved this game when I was a kid. It was just the best. You had the codes to forget the players with the huge heads.
Yep.
And just such a fun game. I really love that one. And people, for whatever reason, people seem to think it's hilarious when I am playing video games. I don't know why. I've said every once in a while I will play a video game.
Mm-hmm. Dave plays games now and then, and he likes the old school games. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
NBA Jam was, when we were kids, oh man, classic. The term... He's on fire and
that
he's
came from
heating
that.
up.
Yeah.
It's from NBA Jam.
I also played Mortal Kombat 2, Disaster, lost in the first round. And what's the shooting game?
Virtua Cop.
Virtua Cop, which it has like these polygon-like graphics that are so dated, but the gameplay still holds up, I have to tell you.
That is my favorite arcade shooter of all time, Virtua Cop 1 and 2.
So remember that you can follow me on Instagram at david.pacman. A lot of those pictures are only on Instagram. They're not on our Twitter page. They're not on our Facebook page, etc. And remember, there's still a membership discount code that I posted to my Instagram account. It's about 8 posts back, and it's a discount code if you want to sign up for membership. Mirroring my recent comments, President Barack Obama urged Democrats yesterday not to get too confident about Hillary Clinton's lead over Donald Trump in the November election polling. President Obama warned that Democrats should really maintain a sense of urgency all the way up to November 8th, saying, quote, "If we're not running scared until the day after the election, we're going to be making a grave mistake." He said this, by the way, to 60 donors at a $10,000 per person fundraiser on Martha's Vineyard. Presented without comment. I've been saying this for a while, though, right? Hillary Clinton leads Donald Trump in the last 21 consecutive national polls. I will show you a list of some of those polls here, and as you will see, 21 polls in a row, ranging from, I don't know, a 1-point lead for Hillary Clinton, basically a statistical tie, all the way up to a 15-point lead in a McClatchy-Marist poll. We also know that electoral-vote.com has a map based on state-by-state polling. They have the race currently at 352 to 180 if the election were held today based on state-by-state polling. They list, and this is crazy to a lot of people, only Iowa as tied. They have both Ohio and Florida and Pennsylvania and Virginia and North Carolina and New Mexico and Arizona and Nevada. I mean, they have all of these states at least somewhat in the Hillary Clinton camp. We know things can change, and there's no reason to think Trump is going to stop saying insane things anytime soon, but he might, and something could happen. You know the types of incidents I'm thinking of that push this back in the direction of Donald Trump, and I've been saying it for weeks. If you're looking at these polls as anything more than a snapshot of where things may be today and as any reason not to go out and vote in November, do not be swayed by that. Not to mention all of the local elections, down ballot, hugely important.
Massively important, arguably more important than the presidential race, because at least at that small local level, you might have a chance at getting someone in office who is not an establishment candidate who might want to change the status quo.
No doubt.
So get out there, do it.
There's no reason at all not to vote in November, no matter what the polls say about Trump versus Clinton. And I do worry that people will become complacent about this. And this is the area where Republicans really do well. They go out there and they put money and effort and energy behind city councils, behind state reps, state senators, all of these different levels of government. And that's how you build a groundswell. I completely reject this movement, but the Republicans, the right has a movement where they actually organize to get right-wing pastors elected to local office. The left needs to be doing something similar, not with pastors, unless they're progressive. But this is where I worry. And I don't know. What about you, Jason? Have you been talking to people who seem like they're not that into voting in November for whatever reason?
Well, strangely enough, I am probably of the camp that you would probably be the fan of. I have never voted in a national election because I don't feel like in my lifetime I've seen a candidate worth voting for.
We've been dealing with this issue with Lewis for years, where it once took me showing up at his place with a camera on election day to document him actually voting, because you've been of the same mindset for a long time. And by the way, you have just unleashed an S storm, if you know what I mean, in terms of people emailing in, because it's still important to vote in the national elections. Because even if I'm not into the whole protest vote or voting against someone, but no matter what names are on the ballot, there is still a best option. And by least worst, we could still say best. And I still think that that logic for some people gets them to not vote at all, even down ballot. And that's hugely damaging to progressives.
And in that specific election that you were talking about, we had some hugely important ballot questions. Hugely important.
I totally forgot. Not only down ballot, but also those individual questions that often come up, including in Massachusetts, the marijuana vote that will be coming up.
Well, that was at the time. This was the other marijuana vote. This was the medical one, right? And we had that, and on the same ballot was the assisted suicide question.
Yes, indeed.
Very, very important things.
This election is apparently going to be rigged, according to Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump. And really what Trump is doing is he is setting himself up to explain on November 9th why he was completely blown out. It's not a guarantee that Trump is going to lose in November, but if you look at the polling right now, 21 of 21 recent polls say Hillary's ahead. State-by-state polling suggests that Donald Trump will not even crack 200 electoral votes in November. If that happens, you know what Trump is doing, Lewis. He is setting himself up to blame his loss on the election being rigged. There's a new webpage on his website which says you can volunteer to be a Trump election observer. The page says, "Help me stop crooked Hillary from rigging this election." Trump is saying Democrats are rigging the election and that's the only way he could lose. He showed up in Pennsylvania, where he is down 10, and said the only way that we will lose in Pennsylvania is if cheating goes on. Well, what about the fact that you're already down 9.2 points in Pennsylvania? Apparently that doesn't matter. Here's the reason this is really dangerous. We know that the DNC was involved in helping Bernie Sanders defeat Hillary Clinton in the Democratic primary. So some people have a passing awareness of that. Then they hear Trump say the November election is rigged, and they sort of think that what happened in the DNC proves that the November election is, quote, rigged. There is a huge difference between a political party helping one candidate to become the nominee and, quote, rigging the way Trump is describing. So I am really worried that this is going to have a very, very negative effect on a lot of people that will be based in a sort of semantic similarity on, quote, rigging, and it's not actually going to mean what people think it means.
Right. And there were those in the Bernie camp who, to them, if Hillary wins California, there's no way that could have been a legitimate win.
Right.
If Hillary wins New York, there's no way that could have been a legitimate win.
Right.
And Donald Trump is now doing the same thing. He's putting that in people's minds. And even if it's looking like it's going to be a Hillary victory, I mean, these people aren't going to change anything. They're just going to be furious, but who knows what they'll do when they're furious.
And unfortunately, people are primed to believe this. We have a quote here from 2014 from Joseph Osinski and Joseph Parent, who wrote, "Just before the 2012 election, we asked a sample of respondents about the likelihood of voter fraud if their preferred presidential candidate didn't win. About 50% said fraud would have been very or somewhat likely. When asked if someone was using dirty tricks, about 85% believed that some candidate, campaign, or political group was, and this applies, as the second paragraph here suggests, both to Republicans and Democrats." My concern is that this type of voter suppression, right? When we talk as progressives about Republicans wanting to make it more difficult for traditionally non-white liberal areas to get extended voting hours or whatever the case may be, we are not talking about the rigging that Donald Trump is suggesting. And he is very astutely here taking advantage of public sentiment around the different definitions of electoral fraud to prime people to believe on November 9th that if indeed he gets blown out, which he may, that it was all because things were rigged. He otherwise would have won. Very, very dangerous. Send me your thoughts on it. We're going to continue talking about that.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Abby Schachter, who is author of No Child Left Alone, Getting Government Out of Parenting. Abby, it's great to talk to you. I've looked at the book extensively, and I'm very, very interested in a lot of the sort of examples that you tell in the book about what you consider to be sort of extreme government overreach into parenting. But I'd like to start a little more broadly, which is, What's sort of the larger statement you're trying to make about the government's role in parenting in the United States?
Well, the first statement I want to make is that the government has taken on a huge role in parenting. I think raising awareness of the problem would be my first goal. And then beyond that, I would say the problem with that isn't just a matter of where parents may differ from government prescriptions, but also that the government tends to do things very broadly by definition, and that tends to make it a poor problem solver in many cases, because some of the problems or issues that they're trying to solve are much more complicated than can be legislated, I would say. And then also there's cost, there's inefficiencies, and then the overarching sort of, I would say, there's no reason in many of these cases for the government to have an opinion in many areas, and we just tend to accept that it does. And I'm hoping that that'll slowly change with greater awareness of the problem.
So are you coming at this from, I mean, in being familiar with your other work, I would want to first ask, do you generally consider yourself like a small government conservative? Is that your general approach? The government should not do anything that is not absolutely necessary, so to speak?
No, because I think that would be a really unachievable goal at this point. So I'm a libertarian, and broadly speaking, in terms of domestic policy, and I embrace the idea that Americans should be trusted to run their own lives in as many cases as possible.
So what about with cases of, for example, child abuse? I mean, certainly there are parents who say, listen, if I believe that my child is going to do best in the world, if I bring him or her up with spankings, and maybe the spankings are an open hand, or maybe the spankings are a closed hand, or maybe they're a stick, or maybe they're an iron or something like that, is it fair in your mind for the government to say, above and beyond our sort of general laws about what constitutes a physical assault in public, that we're going to establish some guidelines for what physically is allowed to parents to do to their kids? Are you okay with that conceptually?
Absolutely. And in fact, there was a recent case in Massachusetts that was exactly this type of thing. A man had disciplined his daughter with an open hand. He had physically hit her in public, and he was charged as a result of this assault, essentially. And the state, it went to the state courts, and they ruled in the father's favor, basically defining his right to discipline his child with an open hand. One of the problems that I encountered doing the research for this book is if all the that over time, many definitions of care for children have been expanded. So the word abuse, the word neglect, the word endangerment, these are terms that have come to mean a much broader series of possible circumstances than they were originally. And
okay, but let's pause on that, because I want to be. I'm hearing what you're saying, and what I'm hearing is, big picture, you are okay with the government taking some positions and getting involved in certain areas of what a parent may or may not do with relation to their child. So once you accept that, we're really dealing in shades of gray, right? And now it comes down to what specifically do you or don't you think is okay, and the definition. So once we get into a discussion of shades of gray, then who should enforce those shades of gray? Who should decide on them in your mind, given that you've accepted some legislation is okay?
Well, listen, I think that I I accept the Supreme Court's definition of the rights of parents to have authority and discretion over their children. The exception that the Supreme Court made, and this was 100 years ago, basically, was that parents are responsible for educating their children. I think that is a terrific standard. Right. So if you want to argue that if it makes you more comfortable to say we're talking about shades of gray, I would say we have to start from the understanding that we're not talking about a situation where it's sort of the middle piece that we're discussing. It's really a pendulum that has swung very, very far in the direction of government oversight. And it's going to take a lot of work by many, many people to push the needle back to a situation where we would get to a point of saying it's just these sort of nuances where we need to define terms. I
think the problem I have with that argument, though, Abby, is what you're basically saying is, okay, we are sort of, what you say, if I'm more comfortable saying we're talking in shades of gray. I think you've confirmed we are talking about shades of gray, but your concern is more with the instances sort of at the extremes, and you outline some of them in your book. The problem I have with that general principle, which is the big problem is with what's on the fringes, is that many libertarians, and I'm not accusing you of this, but I'd be open to hearing your view about it, when they talk about gun control, they say we actually should not be worried about what's going on the fringes, right? All of the negligent incidents that happen based on what we have as generally pretty permissive gun laws. They want to focus on the fact that mostly it's okay, and it seems sort of like the opposite principle.
Okay, well, let me, since my subject isn't gun control, I'm going to take what you're saying and put it to my argument about parenting.
Yeah, or I guess let me rephrase it in a way that maybe makes it more in your wheelhouse, which is, as a general rule, when you look at law and the government, do you always focus merely on these fringe cases?
Right. Well, so the interesting thing about that is that the government is the one doing that in terms of parenting decisions. So if you look at the National School Lunch Program, right? The National School Lunch Program is based on a model that there is a minority of kids who may be at risk for becoming obese. And as a result, we're going to impose that extreme minority possibility and risk, or that, even if it wasn't an extreme, that minority possibility on everyone. And that's where I have the problem. I think it's actually the government that is most often taking the minority and extreme cases and saying, because we don't want that to happen, we're going to impose that the exception and make the exception the rule.
So like, for example, and I'm trying to really find what analogies there are to see if we have sort of a consistent principle. With the issue of transgender bathroom policy, when there's a presentation made that says, hey, really people, in the interest of not creating more laws and restrictions, let people use the bathroom for the gender identity that matches up with them. You have some, typically on the political right, who say, no, there's child predators who might take advantage of these laws, or et cetera. Those are definitely the fringes. I mean, it is almost completely unheard of. You would be completely against using that line of reasoning to restrict bathroom usage, for example.
Yes. So my answer to that would be, why is the government involved in private enterprises and the signs they put on their bathrooms?
All right.
If the government wants to make sure that in the federal office buildings or in state office buildings, they change the signs on their bathroom doors so that legislators are going into, and aides are all the people who work for, in a public institution are going into a bathroom that says, bathroom with urinal, bathroom without urinal. Okay, great. Make the sign however you want it. But but why is the government telling private enterprises the kind of signs on the bathrooms they have to provide? This is exactly the area where I would say it's none of the government's business to impose its view about transgendered Americans on private enterprises.
All right, good. Well, we agree there. In the limited time we have left, to go back to the school lunch example, are you okay? I mean, to some extent, you must grant that schools do have to make decisions about what's available for lunch, right? I mean, on that, someone
Absolutely.
they have to make some decision. And if you are okay with that, then again, it sounds like what we're talking about is you don't believe the specifics they've chosen make sense. So it's really a matter just of people coming together and saying, what particulars make sense. It's not really an argument saying schools shouldn't have any authority over what lunch is served. And then again, we are talking about shades of gray, are we not?
Yes, and I would say in that case, 100%, David. And I would say the response I would give to that is you are 100% right. It's the schools who should be deciding what they serve in their cafeterias, not the states, not the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is the organization and the arm of the government that does decide and does set the nutritional guidelines for the entire country. And the USDA has a lot of other considerations it's making besides the nutritional health of students, of children in America. And by the way, they got it wrong about butter for 30 years. The government has gotten it wrong about just butter. So let the people who are actually going to feed the children these lunches decide what to feed them.
Yeah, I'm not against that. Like with many libertarian influenced ideas, I'm not against what you're saying in the abstract. The problem is knowing what goes on in many specific school districts. A lot of them just don't have the right people there to actually make good decisions for the kids, and that becomes more of a logistical issue than the ideological issue that you're talking about.
Well, I don't have I don't disagree with that, except that I would say, why would you assume that someone sitting in an office in Washington has a better sense of how to make lunch for a kid in middle school in Portland, Oregon, than a person who is in Oregon?
No,
right?
It's a fair question.
Who is in Portland.
The person in Washington,
so that's my problem
the person
there.
in Washington,
My problem there is that
the person in Washington might not necessarily know more than the person in Portland, but in many cases they probably do, and that's why this is difficult, because the general point is the person in Washington won't always make the decision that's better for the person in Portland, and really for me the question is, pragmatically speaking, how do we ensure that for the school districts that really don't have anyone who's well qualified to make decisions about lunches, how do we make sure that the kids in those school districts are still having healthy options? And this becomes more an issue of bureaucracy and logistics than anything else.
Well, I would just disagree in one aspect, and that is, you're essentially saying that you don't trust other people.
Well, you're saying the same thing. You don't trust the person in Washington, and I don't trust the fact that every school district might not have a nutritionist on staff.
Right.
But so both of us have distrust.
I would say to you, so my question would be, given the cost and given the inefficiencies and given the fact that we have the situation that we have now, where there are schools that are actually suffering because of the demands of the federal government, and it's costing them money, and it's making their lives more difficult rather than simpler, aren't the odds of bringing the solution to the particular problem closer to the people it will affect, and therefore give the people it affects more of a possibility of accountability, right? If I have to go to my cafeteria lady, right? I'm a mom of school children, and I hate what they're serving in my school cafeteria.
Yeah.
I'm likely to have a better chance of getting better food in my kid's school if the lunch lady who's serving it is in charge of the decision of what to serve rather than somebody who's 3,000 miles away.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on the lunch lady, but that again, I think that might have to be an argument for another time. Abby
Well,
Schachter,
and also, David, I make my kids lunches, so I'm clearly not trusting, the hot lunch that's provided at my kids' school either.
Right. Well, it's great that you can do that. Not all parents are in that position. The book is No Child Left Alone: Getting Government Out of Parenting. I get we did agree on some things, and I think that anytime I interview a libertarian, that we have to chalk it up to a victory.
Listen, I appreciate the fact that you wanted to do the interview in the first place, so kudos.
All right. Thank you so much for being on.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I like Joe Biden and I like his awkwardness and some of his bizarre comments, but he did something now that a lot of right-wingers are tying into the Hillary is sick conspiracy theories. Yesterday, or the day before, I believe it was yesterday, Joe Biden showed up in Pennsylvania to join Hillary Clinton for a rally there. And he comes down off of his airplane and goes to hug Hillary Clinton. And as we'll play for you here, as I describe what's going on, he did what many people are describing as way too long of an embrace, where he kept his hands sort of around Hillary Clinton's back and waist. And she does the pat, which sort of is a signal that we are now ending the hug. And he seems to almost pull her in closer. She does seem somewhat kind of like she's hanging there in his arms. And like she really, really, really wants to end this hug. And Republicans have come up with the idea that Biden sensed that Hillary, because she's very, very sick, as we're hearing from some right-wingers, that he had to hold her up to prevent her from falling on the ground in some kind of pancaked mess. And to me, it just seems like this is Joe Biden being Joe Biden, where he wanted to hug Hillary for 18 seconds, and that's what he was going to do, no matter how many seconds Hillary wanted to be hugged.
Yeah, just YouTube Joe Biden awkward moments.
Yeah,
you'll get a plethora of great material. He's just kind of an awkward guy, and he has these moments. It's not a big
I think
deal.
it was way more awkward, by the way, when he was rubbing the shoulders of Secretary of Defense Ash Carter's wife, and we'll play that for you as I sort of remind you of that incident. And he just goes up behind her and starts squeezing her shoulders. She has a look on her face like, what on earth is happening behind me? And he just stays right there. He is not moving. He is keeping those hands on her shoulders, and that is what is going on. And then, of course, one of my favorite Biden moments of all time, referencing President Obama's big stick. Take a look at this one.
Now is the time to heed the timeless advice from Teddy Roosevelt. Speak softly and carry a big stick. End of quote. I promise you, the president has a big stick. I promise you.
Take it from Joe Biden. President Obama's stick is not small, and that he clearly communicated clearly to us. I really like Joe Biden. I think he is a very, very good debater. I still remember when he made mincemeat out of Paul Ryan during that vice presidential debate in 2012. These moments I find absolutely hilarious. They really say very nothing about Joe Biden's political prowess, which is pretty... He's carrying the biggest stick of all when it comes to that, isn't he?
Yeah, Joe Biden's got a huge one. And he's just a character. He's a character, and it would have been interesting to see him run. But, of course, he's not going to oppose Hillary. He's, I guess you could say, an establishment candidate. Jason,
do you like this type of thing? I mean, it doesn't influence my opinion.
I feel like Joe Biden must have gone for a really tight hug with Obama at one point and gotten a little extra, sensory, in there.
Yeah, I think he's just a guy who is really all about, he just likes people, and he embraces people. And how could any of us criticize him for that? We had this big announcement yesterday about producer Lewis leaving and changes on the show. We also said hi to Jason Shepard, our new producer who participated. And the feedback started coming in fast and furious. There were a lot of suggestions about places Lewis should move to. We're still collecting those suggestions, and we'll deal with that on Thursday with you, Lewis. But we had the first comment come in about producer Jason Shepard. And it fit the mold of so many comments about us in two ways. Number one, it referred to sexual orientation and homosexuality. And number two, it included a bizarre misspelling. So immediately, and we'll put this up on the screen for you to take a look, someone writing in Jason, but spelling it Jasan, which is unusual. Usually people don't know how to spell Jason. Jason is sexy and has a gay name. So there is that. And of course, I have no idea what a gay name even means. I have no idea how someone could think that the name is Jasan. But what is important about this, Jason, and I'll give you a chance to comment on this and get your reaction, is that it follows the theme of just about every comment that we get on the program. So I don't know if you were surprised or shocked or appalled when you saw that, but welcome.
I think it's just more of the theme of, we are living in the modern day version of the movie Idiocracy, where everyone that's intelligent is definitely gay, and that we have a ridiculous tyrant running for president, and we can't grow food because we can't figure out how to put water in our crops, and yeah, just business as usual here.
But why is sexual orientation so important to so many people in our audience? Is Lewis gay? Is David gay? Are they in a relationship together? One of our first major comments solely about Rachel Gordon, co-host and associate producer Rachel Gordon, was someone emailing in saying, as attractive as they find her, they don't know if she's transgender, but they still would like her if she were. I mean, this obsession, right, with the sexual orientation and gender of people on the show, I don't fully get it.
Well, there are those who, because we are straight allies, they would, if we were gay, it would mean that our commentary on gay issues is not legitimate because we're gay.
Right.
Kind of like how you can't comment on anything Israeli related because you're Jewish.
Which is amazing, because if you say to someone, well, aren't you biased about the issue of gay rights because you're straight? I mean, being straight would make you just as biased about an issue as not being straight, in the sense that you're bringing in your own identity into it. And you all know, if you've been listening to or watching this show for any amount of time, I don't subscribe to the identity politics idea where, depending on what categories you personally fit into, you are either able to or not able to legitimately comment on any particular issue. I don't subscribe to that, but that seems to keep coming up in a lot of stories. So anyway, there's a comment about Jason, or Jasan, as some people seem to be spelling it. Also, I mentioned yesterday that segment producer John is working on a compilation video about Lewis with some of Lewis's greatest hits. We also would love it if you want to record yourself with some kind of a message to Lewis to be included in this compilation video. Either upload it to YouTube as an unlisted video and send us the link, or just take a video on your phone and send it to me in an email, david@davidpakman.com. We may get some interesting submissions from people that we could include some kind of parting words of wisdom or whatever to Lewis.
That sounds great. That sounds fine. Even if you hate me and you want to say something terrible.
Oh, especially.
Yeah. I don't see any problem with that. We'd love to air that too. That has been a common theme for everyone here on the show. Patriotism is alive and well.
Absolutely. So get those to me, ideally within the next 4 or 5 days, because we do want to, there's a lot going into this incredible compilation video. So get those to me. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2DavidP. And here is one voicemail I received that I have some thoughts on.
Yeah, Trump explained about the wall months ago. By not having the wall, billions of dollars flow south across the border every year.
Yeah. Oh, well,
so
Trump
we spend
explained.
a little money, we put the wall up, and it will pay for itself many times over in just the first year. And the billions of dollars flowing south to Mexico will no longer flow south to Mexico. So in that respect, Mexico is paying for the wall because they're not getting our money anymore.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
This is completely debunked. I mean,
What money? Drug money?
Money from people working in the U.S. who are here and then sending money to their families in Mexico is oftentimes what people mean. We've debunked all of this stuff, okay? I mean, number one, first of all, in terms of the crime stuff, undocumented immigrants are actually less likely to commit crime than people in the U.S. legally, because they know that if, depending on what state they commit a crime in, if they're caught, they'll be deported. So number one, it's been totally debunked that undocumented immigrants are more likely to commit crime than any other population that's here on a legal basis. Number two, immigrants, even undocumented immigrants, are a net positive to the American economy, particularly because many of them are paying into social programs that they will never actually pull benefits out of because they are here undocumented. Now, this isn't me saying break the law, do whatever you want, anarchy, but let's have our discussion based in fact, Lewis, where we've debunked most of these talking points about the undocumented immigrant community.
Yeah, and let's debunk the idea that this wall will ever happen even if Donald Trump becomes president. It's just not going to happen.
No.
There's not going to be a wall.
It's you could probably build fencing in some areas by executive action, but this bigger wall that he's talking about is not going to happen. On the bonus show today, we will talk about the Philippines drug killings continuing. We will also talk about an NBA player that beat both Michael Phelps and Ryan Lochte in swimming back in the day. And also a Texas lawmaker is now targeting gun-free businesses. We will hear about all of those stories and more on today's bonus show. There is one way to get access to the bonus show, and it's by being a David Pakman Show member. And of course, you can sign up on the brand new and very well reviewed by our audience website, davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.